two new Ducks, and a big returner in Bryce Betcher, you're going to love Makhi Hughes, and then you're going to be really annoyed.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Benson McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, where you can get big upsets, game-winning drives. They got everything there. The NFL playoffs are just better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, whether you win or lose. Just like that, visit FanDuel.com to get started. Malik Benson, that's second segment because I'm not sure about that one. I'm just not sure about a couple of things, and Bryce Betcher is back for 2025. Here we go. So, Makhi Hughes is the biggest roster announcement that Oregon got yesterday. This is the number one running back in the transfer portal, number 3 overall player in the transfer portal per 24/7 Sports, a guy who in his first 2 years at Tulane has wildly outperformed what his high school recruiting profile was. He was outside the top 100 at his position, and yet he goes to Tulane, and with 2 different head coaches and 2 different offensive coordinators, guy has absolutely thrived. He has run for over 2,700 yards in the last 2 seasons. In 2023, he went for 1,378 yards and 7 touchdowns. This past season with the Green Wave, he ran for just over 1,400 yards and 15 touchdowns. Now, he's not a huge pass catcher. He has just 20 total receptions over the last couple of years, but this is Oregon's number 1 running back. I expect him to have a 1,000-yard season. He could be an all-conference caliber guy. So you're going to love him. You're going to love him. And then, oh my gosh, I'm going to get back to him in a moment. But this was literally the first thing that went into my head before how great of a player he is, which is fantastic. I'm not kidding you guys here. I'm not pulling a fast one on you. This is not April Fool's Day. Makhi Hughes is the older brother of Oregon 5-star 2025 commit Naeem Offord. It's never going to go away. I am planning to be at Big Ten Media Days this year. Last year, I ran into Brad Nessler and snagged him for an interview on this show. It was awesome. If I run into him again, I am going to beg him with everything, every ounce of emotional fortitude that I have to not overblow the story here. Just be tempered with the way that you roll this one out. Please. The Rose Bowl stunk, but man, every time we heard for the 800th time that Bo and Tez are brothers, here's what I legitimately wonder. Which TV crew is going to be the first to not just bring up the Makhi Hughes-Naeem Offord connection, but also to then somehow, with neither guy on the roster, remind everybody about Bo Nix and Tez Johnson? I don't know who the first one's going to be. So, obviously, in the cold open, I was just messing with you a little bit when I said he'd annoy you. He's not going to, but boy, the brotherly connection, it's very strong. By the way, Patrick Herbert, younger brother of Justin Herbert. Nobody outside of Eugene is aware of that fact. I actually cannot believe that Oregon's got this going again. So, I had to put that in the segment. That just, it's too good. It's too good. It's reached almost Nick Castellanos levels of sports lore for me, where it just is impossible that it keeps happening, but it just keeps happening. Any tragic event in the world, Castellanos is going deep every single time. Okay, so back to Makhi Hughes. This guy's a stud. Absolute bona fide stud. Jordan James is off to the NFL, and coming into this decision when Oregon was the reported favorite for him and had him on campus for a visit, I said it's a want. Makhi Hughes is a want if Jordan James stays. It is a need if Jordan James goes. So that's a need. Oregon has now filled a pretty sizable need. Now, as we saw against Ohio State the second time around, if the offensive line doesn't open up any holes, a running back isn't going to be able to do literally anything. But what I like about Makhi Hughes that he brings to the table that I don't think, or that I know Oregon didn't have this year, he has more home run speed and a little bit more side-to-side movement. Now, Noah Whittington has that, but I think we've seen post-injury that Noah Whittington is the same guy he was back in 22 in glimpses, but not in prolonged stretches throughout the course of the year. So I was not going to be comfortable with rolling out Whittington as the one, but Whittington is the two again. I'm so here for it because there were days where they could rest Jordan James a little bit because, hey, Whittington's got the hot hand, feet, looks great, and he was awesome at times. So I think that's where the top of Oregon's running back room is going to sit. Hughes, build-wise, is kind of similar to Jordan James, both kind of in the 5'10", 5'11", both in the 210, 220 sort of range. Hughes has a little bit more Bucky Irving to him. When I watch Makhi Hughes run, I see a combination of Jordan James and Bucky Irving. He will happily go between the tackles. Bucky wasn't always crazy about a straight downhill run. Jordan James is always crazy about a straight downhill run. And when James makes contact, he's running you over. Hughes can do that. But one thing you never saw Jordan James do a lot of, and where, some people were lamenting during the Rose Bowl or other portions of the season, guys like Jeff Schwartz were wondering, hey, why is Oregon running side to side with Jordan James? I think that was a fair question to ask because he is a downhill guy. I always describe James as CJ Verdell plus. He is a one-cut back, and he will run through your face and pick up the extra yardage that way. Hughes can do that, but he also has kind of that, frankly, Noah Whittington-esque shiftiness in his feet. He will move side to side, and he accelerates up to top speed quicker than Jordan James did. That's not to say he's a better running back than Jordan James. We haven't seen him run against the Big Ten for an entire year. We'll see how it goes. I'm just saying stylistically, I think you get the best elements of Jordan James and the best elements of Bucky Irving, and you kind of put them together. Now, he has played his true freshman and true sophomore seasons at Tulane. As I mentioned, he's been wildly successful and productive there. If he comes to Oregon and has another really good year, he's probably off to the NFL. But by that time, Oregon's got some running backs coming down the pipeline, guys like Dink Riggs, who I would think will then be ready for the 2026 campaign. But fully expect Hughes to be the number one guy. Fully expect him to be able to have a 1,000-yard season. And for Oregon to go out, even after, one question I got frequently and discussed on this show once upon a time, just a couple of episodes ago, is does the Rose Bowl loss affect Oregon's recruiting? Well, here they are. I'll talk about Malik Benson in the next segment, and they've just added one of the 5 best players available, who is the 3rd highest graded running back in all of college football, according to Pro Football Focus, behind these 2 guys you might have heard of, Ashton Genty and Cameron Scadaboo. The first was a Heisman finalist. The second should have been a Heisman finalist. His season should also still be going, but Arizona State couldn't get a stop on 4th and 13, and there were some questionable calls in that one. But I think for Oregon, this is a necessary move because I didn't see someone who is automatically prepared or had shown consistent glimpses that he could step in and be running back number 1. Jordan James had. He was the number 2 to Bucky Irving once Whittington went down in the 2023 season after the Colorado game. But when you saw Jordan James run, there were prolonged stretches at times where you felt, hey, maybe this should be a Jordan James day, the Pac-12 title game. James looked better than Bucky Irving. They're different, but you saw all of that, and the coaching staff saw that. I haven't seen that because post-injury Noah Whittington, different than the guy I think he was beforehand. But having that as your running back tandem, I think Oregon is in a pretty darn good position there. Let me know your thoughts below in the YouTube comments or hit me up on Twitter. So anytime you bring in a transfer, he's a lock to start, right? Right? I don't know that that's always right. First, a reminder, this episode brought to you by Rocket Money. Rocket Money can help you find subscriptions that you might be paying for twice. You don't want to be doing that. You want to get Rocket Money. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. If I had $740, you know what I'd do? Vegas is 2.5 hours down the road. I'd go have myself a grand old weekend. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. We have reached the time of year. It's always the time of year for second segment sips, by the way. I just chose not to include it today. Don't worry. But we've reached the time of year where I am not keen on recording shows before, I don't know, 10 p.m. or so local time. I'm in the Mountain Time Zone, which is a great time zone, by the way. I love Pacific. Mountain is growing on me. Central and Eastern, get out of here. Oh, oof, no. Eastern especially. 8:20 Sunday Night Football. Gosh, that's just a nightmare. So Oregon goes out and adds Malik Benson. And this was not the last move that Oregon made yesterday because they added Bryce Betcher, and that news dropped about 9:30 p.m. my time, hence the point that I was just making there. But Malik Benson and Makhi Hughes, those are the two newest Ducks that are going to be contributors, and we'll talk about Bryce Betcher later on today's show. But Benson feels like a guy that has finally made his way to Oregon and was kind of always bound to. So in 2023, he emerged from the JUCO ranks, and he was one of the top JUCO players in the country. Goes to Alabama. He ends the season with 13 catches for 162 yards and a touchdown. He transfers in the offseason to Florida State, seeking greener pastures. And I don't know if you watched or just followed any Florida State football this year. Not only were they worse than their 2-10 record indicated, their only wins were Charleston Southern and Cal, by the way. They had one of the worst passing offenses I have ever seen. It was ugly. I mean, ugly. The whole year. He ended the season with 25 catches, 311 yards, and 1 touchdown. He has never in his Division I playing career had a 100-yard game. So the numbers with Malik Benson are not as impressive as his physical traits because he's 6'1", 195 pounds. He's from Lansing, Kansas originally. He played 2 years at Hutchinson Community College, which is a really good JUCO. There have been a lot of Division I players to come out of there. I come across them all the time in my play-by-play ventures. That is a very well-known community college for a couple of different sports, football among them. But he spent 2 years there, and he was an all-NJCAA American. That's pretty darn good. He was an All-American at the JUCO level. He was the number 1 JUCO wideout coming out of those ranks back in the 2023 cycle. So he is most likely, for now, heading to his final year of eligibility over to Eugene. I say for now because this will be his 3rd year playing Division I football. He played 2 years of the JUCO ranks. Well, if we get to a point, which we haven't yet, but possibly could get to, if we reach a point where JUCO doesn't count at all, he could have another season left. But we'll just wait and see. We know Oregon's going to have him for 2025. Now, Oregon recruited him back in 2023. There were a lot of big-time schools going after him. Georgia was after him. Bama ended up getting him. LSU wanted him. And Oregon was in the mix as well. And when I look at Malik Benson, on the one hand, I see the potential for Evan Stewart. And Stewart, his best season was 2022, where he had more receptions and yards, actually, than what he had for Oregon this year. And Evan Stewart is, of course, returning, which is huge news for the Ducks wide receiver room. And adding Benson, I think, kind of solidifies what the rotation of guys is going to be. But I don't know that Benson is automatically slotted into being one of those top end guys. He certainly could be. 6'1", 195 pounds. He's a good athlete. He can run after the catch. He's a big-bodied receiver. He has got really good hands. He can make contested catches. There are a lot of things to like about him. But on the one hand, I see the Evan Stewart with the untapped potential, the physical traits. Like, I get that angle of it. The other angle of it that I can't get out of my head is a Cam Alexander or a Sione Laulea or a George Silva. So Alexander came over to Oregon and was a 4-star transfer, was an all-conference performer at UTSA, did not see the field in a meaningful way for the Ducks this year. Sione Laulea was the number 1 JUCO corner in the last cycle, did not see the field in a meaningful way for Oregon. George Silva, 2 cycles ago, was the top offensive tackle from the JUCO ranks, has not played. He has seen the field before, but he never worked his way up the depth chart to become a starter. Now he's on the 2 deep. You know, if there had been an injury, Silva might have been the guy to slide in and, you know, play for Josh Connolly or a Johnny Cornelius. Josh Connolly, by the way, has not yet declared for the NFL draft. I imagine an announcement will be coming in the next couple of days on that. That's just my guess. But when I look at Malik Benson and what's in this Oregon wide receiver room, I can absolutely see a world where he's just a guy. I could see him being one of the starting wide receivers outside. Because Oregon, if they liked him 2 cycles ago and we're still in contact with it, they clearly see something about him that they like. And I think when it comes to talent acquisition, we've learned that this staff tends to have earned our trust. But at the same time, not every transfer they have brought in goes on to be a high-impact starter. They brought in Connor Soley 2 cycles ago. He was a special teams guy, which is kind of what he was at Arizona State. There's nothing wrong with bringing in guys like that. There's nothing wrong with adding depth. But when I see Benson coming over, he's got more experience than a Kyler Casper per se. But Casper, before he got injured this year, looked like he was starting to work a role into the offense at the very least as a goal line specialist. And Malik Benson, big-bodied receiver. Casper is taller. I think Benson's a little bit thicker. Benson's got more experience. So I can certainly see Benson being one of Oregon's starting wide receivers. I just won't be surprised if other guys are able to pass him on the depth chart, because the profile that he brings on paper looks really good, and it didn't work out at Florida State, mostly because Florida State was a disaster area. But the season before at Alabama, when Oregon wanted him, well, he wasn't able to carve out a big role there either. And Bama had a bunch of talented receivers in that 2023 season. Guys like Isaiah Bond, who are now at Texas. And I forget the other guy's name, who I'm thinking of. But he was number 7. Wasn't the biggest guy in the world. I don't remember. But he wasn't able to beat those guys out. So I think this is someone who's obviously brought into Oregon's wide receiver room to compete and to play. But I'm not sharping him in as a starter and high-level contributor and producer for 2025 the way I am Makhi Hughes. I have 0 doubts. I can see 0 situations, non-injury related, where Makhi Hughes just doesn't play for Oregon and gets beat out by guys on the roster. I don't see that. But with Benson, I think it could go either way. I'm down for having someone who's played 4 years of college football, whose body is obviously physically ready, and he's shown some glimpses of the potential and, you know, is a downfield kind of threat. But is he so special, so dynamic that, oh, man, you have to play this guy. He's going to be the number 1 receiver. No, I don't see that. I think it's another name in the room, but I could see him getting beat out. I understand, though, why they go out there and make this move. So, the wide receiver room and the defensive back room, I don't know if in my life, certainly since I've been covering Oregon on this show, there has not been a year where we've seen this level of turnover at those position groups at the same time. Oregon is losing its top 6 defensive backs. We'll see what happens with Kobe Savage. Maybe he gets another year of eligibility and comes back. Top 6 defensive backs, top 3 wide receivers. 9 guys from the outside. That's a lot. That's a lot of guys. One guy that they're not going to have to replace is Bryce Betcher because he's back. And yes, that is very good news. That's next. So Oregon has lost some guys from this defense, is losing guys to eligibility. Derek Harmon declared for the draft. Jordan James declared for the draft from the offensive side of the ball. But Bryce Betcher, who's been drafted into Major League Baseball, is back for 2025. He announces it late last night. Oregon loves doing this, apparently. I think they kind of stagger the announcements to try and dominate the news cycle for the day. It's very strategic. Dan gives off the vibe of somebody that is thinking about how to do those things, or at least he has people that think about how to do those things. So Bryce Betcher is back. Oregon's leading tackler, gets another year of eligibility somehow, somewhere. I don't know all the details about how that happened, but frankly, don't care that much. Bryce Betcher being back is a very good thing. I know Oregon fans in the wake of the Ohio State game were looking at two position groups in particular, the safeties and the linebackers, and saying, boy, it feels like Oregon needs more there, and they need more size on the outside. I got news for you. I don't know that anybody can actually stop Jeremiah Smith, but hey, Texas is going to try. But I agree, you can get more production out of the safety room. I also agree, Oregon's linebackers didn't always play great this year. Bryce Betcher did. He was the highest rated per Pro Football Focus. I should just say according to Pro Football Focus to make it easier on myself, but anyway, all season long. And Lanning has praised him a lot because he's been quite good. And Betcher has just showed up, worked hard. Eugene kid, he's like he is an incredibly old school college football player in that sense. So too is Jordan James, by the way. Just a quick side note. There is this notion that old school recruiting doesn't matter as much as all portal and kids don't, it doesn't feel the same. I agree. There are a lot of things that are different. There are still plenty of examples of traditional college football careers. Jordan James is one of them. Blue chip recruit, so it gets people's attention. Ooh, hey, he's 4-star running back. He plays some as a true freshman, has a legitimate role as the short yardage guy, excels in that role. Then, because of an injury, he has a bigger role the following season, shows the full potential, and then in his third year, he has the best season of his career, and now he's going to the NFL. Well, that's kind of how we want it to go. I think people get caught up in the negative examples, the Ryan Pellum situations of the world, who was a 4-star receiver that flipped from USC last year to the Ducks and wasn't able to work his way up the depth chart, and maybe because of the Malik Benson addition, ends up hitting the transfer portal. And unfortunately for him, his only impact at Oregon was fumbling the punt against Michigan. That's quite literally the most notable thing Ryan Pellum did since committing to Oregon. Flipping from USC, that's one thing. But I look at what Bryce Betcher, just bringing it back for a moment before I get too sidetracked. I look at Bryce Betcher and say, okay, him and Devin Jackson are now veterans together in that linebacker room. So you have continuity at that position. Jackson's a guy who has improved each of the last couple of seasons. So I've got every inclination to think he's going to be able to do that again. But having Bryce Betcher there as your primary guy, I think that's a great situation to be in because he knows the defense, he's been around college football, and he's proven that he can produce. And if you were wanting more out of Oregon's linebacker room, at times so was I. But remember that Oregon's defense was only bad in a handful of games this year. Now, those were oftentimes against the best teams they played, but to say that it felt like they were way far away and not close to where they needed to be, no, they weren't where they need to be, but that doesn't mean they're super duper far away from it just because they had a couple of bad games against great teams. So I like having Betcher back in there. I don't think that Oregon needs to go out in the portal and try to find a linebacker now. Certainly there are some available. I haven't seen or heard that the Ducks are tied to any in the portal. But if you've got Bryce Betcher and Devin Jackson there, Oregon's recruited this position well over the last couple of years. I mean, at some point, one of those guys has got to be ready, right? Kamar Mathuti, Braden Platt, Jerry Mixon, Dylan Williams. They just go down the list. There were a lot of guys in that room that are going to be going into their second or third seasons of college football. It's not like they haven't been practicing or getting ready. It's not like they don't want to play. And as I'm recording the show, none of them have hit the transfer portal yet. So that would lead me to believe that Oregon is confident they can roll with the 2 veterans and 2 younger guys. Maybe they'll even mix them together. I'm sure they'll do plenty of mixing and matching. But Oregon each of the last few years has shown they play 4 linebackers in their 4-2-5 look. This year, it was Bossa and Betcher, and then the second unit most often was Devin Jackson and Justin Jacobs, or sometimes they'd have Jackson and Betcher. They rotate those guys through, but you got to have at least 4. So there are 2 sure things. Now you're looking for 2 more that you feel confident enough in playing, and I think by second or third season, when you got a handful of blue chip recruits, they're not all going to pan out, but at least 1 or 2 of them should be able to. So I feel fine about Oregon's linebacker room right now. I'm just interested to see how that depth chart plays out. But I love having him back. Bryce Betcher's just awesome. And not just because of the Washington game thing with the baseball bat. Like, that was awesome. That was some awesome Dan Lanning sicko kind of stuff. But yeah, I like having him back. So Ryan Pellum, though, hits the transfer portal, entered it with a do not contact tag. I didn't see, as I'm recording the show, where he ended up. USC certainly would be a candidate there. I don't know that it was a 1-to-1 replacement where Pellum sees Benson coming in and says, oh, I'm not going to be able to get there. Because those guys are different players. I think Pellum probably looked at DeCorian more coming in and thought, yeah, that combined with Justice Lowe and Jerion Dickey's there, that's a lot of talent and experience, and I could probably go somewhere and see the field. But as it stands right now, Lanning has still not lost a starting player to the transfer portal. The closest thing, and I mean the closest thing, would be Amarion Winston, who wasn't a starter. He was a rotation guy. Jaden Moore was a rotation guy. But of the starting 22 that Oregon's had in the 3 seasons Dan Lanning's been the head coach, not a single starter has transferred out. That's a pretty darn impressive thing. I don't know that lasts forever, but I know that it's lasted to this point, and there are plenty of other major programs that have lost guys. Alabama had Seth McLaughlin transfer when Kalen DeBoer got there, and now that's different because there was a head coaching change, of course, but he transferred up to Ohio State, won the Remington Award, and then he gets hurt, and Ohio State's offensive line is really good anyway. But with regards to the NFL draft, which, Derek Harmon's declared for, and Birch is going to, and Tez is going to, and they're out of eligibility anyway, and Jordan James is going. There has not yet been an official announcement on Josh Connerly. I fully expect one. The deadline to declare for the draft is January 15th. That's a week from the day this show is airing. And the deadline to revoke that declaration is January 18th. So we will know by next week at the latest if Josh Connerly is in fact going to the NFL draft. I will say I'm a little surprised it hasn't happened now. I'm not sure what he's waiting for, but there are a lot of things that go into that sort of decision. So I'm fully expecting it. I'm not suddenly getting my hopes up that Oregon came back and ponied up the NIL in a big way to keep him there as the starting left tackle. Maybe they did. I doubt it. I would love to be pleasantly surprised on that front, but not sitting around waiting for it right now. So, questions, thoughts, comments, anything, drop them in the YouTube comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, or become a Locked On Ducks insider to get priority mailbag access and a bunch of other perks as well. You can become that in the description below. There's this link. You click on it, you get a free 14-day trial. If you don't like it, by all means, cancel. No hard feelings. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time, and have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, go Ducks.